That day, I wore a new dress shirt, carried a special wedding gift, and walked into the reception hall with excitement. But just a few seconds later, the blood in my veins seemed to freeze. The bride, the groom, they weren't my brother. I stood lost amidst unfamiliar gazes while the hushed laughter around me cut straight into my pride. Hurriedly calling my parents, I heard a cold response. "Dean's wedding was held last week. You should check the family group chat." On my phone screen, a video popped up, showing me standing bewildered at a stranger's wedding. And at that moment, something inside me broke, like a hydroelectric dam releasing a flood. "Hello, my name is Leon. I'm 31 years old, living in a small industrial town called Milford, located in the Midwest of the United States. There's nothing particularly special about this place. Just factories belching smoke, cracked concrete streets, and people like me toiling day after day to make ends meet. I work as a machine repairman in an old mechanic shop, where the noise of engines and the smell of grease blend into an atmosphere so familiar that sometimes I wonder if I can still feel anything else. The job isn't glamorous, just tightening bolts, welding, and occasionally crawling under machinery to fix broken parts. The pay is enough to get by, but not much more. I live alone in a small rented house on the outskirts with an old pickup truck and a few odds and ends. I'm not the type to complain, but sometimes I wonder why my life feels so monotonous. I'm a quiet person, not much of a talker. The guys at the shop call me Silent Leon because I never join in the chatter by the coffee machine or the drinks after work. It's not that I dislike them, it's just I'm used to keeping things to myself. I've been like that since I was a kid. My parents, hardworking manual laborers like me, always expected more from their children. And then there was Dean, my twin brother. We were born on the same day at the same hour, but our lives took completely different paths. Dean is the perfect version of me, at least in everyone's eyes. He's smart, outgoing, always knowing how to make people laugh and love him. From a young age, Dean was the center of attention. And me? I was just the quiet shadow beside him. Let me tell you about our childhood, because those memories still haunt me to this day like a scar that never heals. We grew up in a small house on the outskirts of Milford, where Dad worked as a factory worker and Mom was a cashier at the local supermarket. They weren't rich, but love, well, it was distributed unevenly. Dean was always favored. Every birthday, year after year, Dean got a slightly bigger cake, a slightly more expensive gift. I remember when we were 10, we both ran in a school race. Dean came in first and I came in second. My parents cheered and hugged Dean tightly, while I got a cursory pat on the shoulder. "Try harder next time, Leon." Next time, I had already tried my best, but it was fine, I told myself. It wasn't Dean's fault. He was just luckier. Then there was the time when we were 12 and our parents threw a small party for Dean's academic achievements. He was top of the class while I was just average. Mom baked a big chocolate cake and invited the whole family. Everyone showered Dean with praise. "Dean's so smart. Dean's going to be successful." And me? I sat in the corner holding a small piece of cake, trying to swallow it despite the bitter lump in my throat. Dad looked at me and said something I still remember. "Leon, you should learn from your brother. Don't keep being so withdrawn." Withdrawn? I was just trying my best. I wasn't Dean. I couldn't laugh and talk as brightly as he did. I liked sitting alone, sketching machines or fixing broken things in the garage. The favoritism in our family wasn't just in words, it seeped into everything. When we were 16, Dean was encouraged to pursue a prestigious university, while I was advised to learn a trade since you're not cut out for books. I don't blame them, really. My parents worked hard and Dean was their hope. But each time my heart tightened. I felt like a spare part, a dim shadow next to my brother's radiant glow. I love Dean. He's my twin brother, after all. We used to share everything, from a double bed to childhood secrets. But gradually the distance grew. Dean got busy with friends and success while I quietly retreated into my shell. Now at 31, I still live with those memories. Every time I visit home, Mom's voice always asks about Dean first. How's Dean? How's his job going? Then she asks about me as an afterthought. Dad is quieter, but I know he's proud of Dean. Dean's now a successful businessman working in a big city with his own house and a fancy car. He's even getting married soon. And me? I'm still the same old Leon, fixing machines at the shop, living alone. But you know what? Deep down, I have a secret about my investments, a sum of money I barely dare to think about, something I keep locked tight in my heart like a precious gem in a safe. And recently, that investment has grown significantly. I now have a substantial amount, enough to change my life. But I haven't told anyone. Why? Because I'm afraid. Afraid that if they knew, they'd look at me differently. Not out of love, but out of self-interest. Not because I'm selfish, but because I want to protect it from the gazes of my family. Those gazes that once made me feel small, invisible. But now, with Dean's wedding approaching, I thought I could do something to prove, not to them, but to myself. A few weeks before Dean's wedding, I heard through the grapevine from Mrs. Maria, the tailor shop owner, that my family had held a meeting between the groom's and bride's families at a fancy restaurant downtown. Your family was all abuzz, Leon, Mrs. Maria said, her eyes lighting up when she mentioned Dean. Your mom was bragging about how the bride is as beautiful as a pageant queen, and her family is full of educated folks. I stood there, holding the suit I was trying on, forcing an awkward smile. No one had told me about that meeting. Not a single invitation, not a single text. I thought maybe they were busy, maybe they forgot, but deep down, I knew I wasn't part of the perfect picture they wanted to show off to the bride's family. I drove home, my heart heavy, telling myself, it's okay. I still have the wedding. I'll be there, with my special gift. The next day, I decided to turn my sadness into action. I drove my old pickup truck to a car dealership on the outskirts of town, where shiny vehicles gleamed under the showroom lights. I had saved a substantial amount from my stock investments, and I knew exactly what I wanted: a bright red convertible Mustang, the kind of car Dean had dreamed of when we were just two kids sitting in Dad's garage, flipping through car magazines. One day, bro, Dean had said, his eyes sparkling, I'm gonna drive a Mustang speeding like the wind. I wanted to make that dream come true, not just for Dean, but to prove that I could do something big for my little brother. The salesman, a guy named Tom, led me to a fiery red Mustang GT, priced at $60,000. This one's a rare gem, sir, Tom said, gently stroking the hood. V8 engine, 450 horsepower, premium leather interior. Whoever gets this as a gift is gonna lose their mind. I stood there, staring at the gleaming car, imagining how surprised Dean would be. I'll take it, I said, my voice firm, though my heart trembled at the thought of the massive sum. Tom was shocked. You're buying this as a wedding gift? Your brother's one lucky guy. I just smiled, signed the contract, and arranged for the car to be delivered to the restaurant on the wedding day as a surprise for Dean. As I left the showroom, I felt a sense of relief, as if I had poured a piece of my heart into that gift. Saturday came, 2 days before the wedding. I sat in my small kitchen, sunlight filtering through the worn-out curtains, casting a glow on the cold black coffee on the table. I stared at the mug, my heart swirling with mixed emotions. Dean's wedding, my twin brother, the one I used to share every childhood secret with, was the biggest event our family had ever had. I was happy, truly. I imagined Dean in a sharp suit, his smile as bright as the sun, holding his bride's hand as they walked down the aisle. I thought about the gift I had prepared. The fiery red Mustang, the one he dreamed of when we were kids in Dad's garage, flipping through car magazines. I was eager to see the surprise in his eyes, to see Mom smile at me, to feel Dad pat my shoulder and say, I'm proud of you. But mixed with that joy was an unnamed anxiety. Would I truly be welcomed? Would they want me there, or would I just be an extra guest like so many times before? My phone sat in front of me. I took a deep breath and dialed Mom's number. I wanted to be part of this big day, even if just in a small way. I wanted to prove that I, Leon, could do something meaningful for my brother. "Hello, Mom?" My voice trembled slightly as she picked up. There was noise in the background, clinking dishes, people laughing and talking, probably at a restaurant or some busy place preparing for the wedding. "I'm calling to ask about Dean's wedding. Is there anything I can help with?" "Oh, Leon," Mom replied, her voice cheerful but rushed as if I were an interruption. "No need, dear. Everything's under control. Dean and the bride have taken care of everything. Just show up on time, okay?" Her tone was sweet, but I could hear the dismissiveness. I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. "All right. So what's the location and time? I want to be prepared." Mom quickly rattled off the address of a restaurant 2 hours' drive from Milford, her voice flat. "Monday, 3 p.m. Make sure you're there. Oh, and Dean's really busy, so don't bother him." Then she laughed. The laugh I knew was reserved for Dean, not me. I nodded into the phone, though she couldn't see me. "Got it. I'll be there on time," I said, keeping my voice calm. I wanted to ask about the family meeting with the bride's side, but she hung up, leaving me with the long, empty beep. I called Dean, hoping a chat with my brother would feel different. "Hey, Leon," Dean answered, his voice lively. "You doing okay?" "The wedding's keeping me swamped. Sorry about that." I forced a smile and asked, "Dean, I want to help with the wedding. Is there anything I can do?" He replied instantly, his tone smooth as if rehearsed. "Oh, don't worry, bro. We've got everything covered. Just come and have fun with the family, all right?" Then he laughed, the flashy laugh I'd heard 100 times when he wanted to end a conversation quickly. "Gotta run, meeting with the bride's family. Catch you later." He hung up, leaving me with a sinking feeling like falling from a great height. I sat there, the cold coffee in my hand, staring at the fading sunlight on the table. Disappointment, heartache, and a touch of bitterness. They didn't need me. Not really. I had been excited, anxious, and had prepared a gift with all the love of a brother. But all I got in return were empty words and dismissive responses. The family meeting I wasn't invited to, Mom's rushed call, Dean's polished tone. It all felt like tiny knives, reminding me that in their eyes I was still the insignificant Leon, the unimportant one. I stood up and walked to the garage where my old pickup truck was waiting. I told myself, "It's fine, I'll still go, I'll show them." That afternoon I drove to the tailor shop in town to pick up the suit I'd ordered. The navy blue suit, simple but well-fitted, was the most expensive thing I'd ever bought for myself. The shop owner, Mrs. Maria, smiled brightly. "Leon, you look so sharp. Your brother's wedding must be exciting, huh?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I hope so." But as I left the shop, my heart felt heavy again. I remembered the last time I saw Dean 6 months ago when he came home for a visit. He was wearing an expensive suit, driving a brand new BMW, talking about some big project at his company. I sat across from him in an old dress shirt, talking about fixing a machine at the shop. Mom listened to Dean, her eyes sparkling. "Me?" She just nodded absent-mindedly before turning back to ask Dean about his fiancée. That evening, I sat in my small living room, opening my laptop to check my emails. A notification from the car delivery company confirmed that the Mustang would be delivered to the restaurant on the wedding day, as a surprise for Dean. I smiled, picturing his reaction. But then my phone buzzed. A message from Mom in the family group chat. "Leon, make sure to dress nicely. The wedding's full of important people." I stared at the message, my heart stinging. They always thought I wasn't good enough, didn't they? But I pushed the thought aside, telling myself, "It's fine. I'll surprise them." The next day, I drove to a car wash, preparing meticulously for the trip. The guy washing my truck, Tommy, teased, "Leon, getting all fancy for a wedding? You planning to get hitched yourself soon?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Nah, it's my brother's wedding." Tommy nodded, but I caught his look, the pitying glance. The whole town knew Dean was the star and I was just the overshadowed brother. I didn't blame them. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling as childhood memories flooded back. I remembered the times my parents bragged about Dean to the neighbors while I stood in the yard, pretending to be busy fixing a broken bike. Those memories were like small cuts, not enough to kill me, but enough to make me feel like I was always lacking something, whether it was recognition or just simple love. That morning, I woke up early, put on my suit, and looked in the mirror. I didn't look bad, honestly. I took a deep breath and told myself, today is Dean's day, but it's also my day. I'll show them. I drove to the restaurant, my heart pounding. The radio in my truck played a country song about coming home. I smiled, but the nervous anticipation didn't fade. As I drove through the familiar streets of Milford, the factory smoke still hung thick in the air, but the sunlight today was radiant. I thought about the gift, the fiery red car waiting to be delivered. I thought about Dean, about my parents, about the years I spent living in their shadows. I turned off the radio to cut through the stream of thoughts, wanting to focus on the road ahead. The restaurant Mom had sent the address for was in a neighboring city, a 2-hour drive away. I glanced at the clock, 12:30 p.m. Still plenty of time to arrive on time. On the way, I tried to picture the wedding scene. Dean in a sharp suit, the bride, whom I'd only seen in photos, in a stunning white dress. My parents were surely bustling about, Mom with her beaming smile, Dad with a proud pat on Dean's shoulder. I wondered where I would fit into that picture. In a corner, probably, as always. The restaurant came into view as I turned onto the city's main road, a luxurious building with white stone columns and gleaming glass under the sunlight. The parking lot was filled with expensive cars, the kind I'd only seen in magazines. I parked my old pickup truck in a secluded corner, telling myself, it's fine, I don't need to show off. I checked my suit, smoothed my hair, took a deep breath and stepped out of the truck. The faint sound of a piano drifted from inside. I glanced at my watch, 2:45 p.m., right on time. Stepping into the lobby, I was overwhelmed by the opulence. Dazzling chandeliers, intricately arranged fresh flowers, and staff in crisp uniforms moving silently. My eyes landed on a signboard. The text was clear. James and Emily's wedding. I froze. James? Emily? A slight frown creased my brow. It must be a small mix-up, I reassured myself. Maybe the restaurant hadn't updated the sign. I walked into the banquet hall where guests were chatting animatedly. They were dressed in glamorous outfits, laughing and talking cheerfully. I quietly found a corner to stand in, waiting. But the more I looked, the stranger it felt. Not a single familiar face. No Dean, no parents, no one from the family group chat. My heart started beating faster. I pulled out my phone and texted Mom, "Mom, I'm here." But why does the sign say James and Emily's wedding? Is there a mistake? I waited, eyes glued to the screen. 1 minute, then 2. No reply. I called her. The phone rang, but no one picked up. My mind began to spiral. I looked around and saw a server passing by, so I asked, "Excuse me, where's Dean Carter's wedding?" He looked at me, surprised. "Dean Carter? I don't see that name. This is just James's wedding, sir." The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. I stepped back, leaning against the wall to steady myself. Something was wrong. I called Mom again, then Dad, then Dean. No one answered. The guests started noticing me. A guy in a suit standing awkwardly in the lobby. A few whispered, pointing. I overheard, "Who's that?" Did he come to the wrong wedding? My face burned and my hand tightened around my phone. I wanted to disappear, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Finally, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom in the family group chat. "Leon, where are you?" Dean's wedding was last week. I read the message over and over as if my brain couldn't process it. Last week? I called Mom immediately, and this time she picked up. "Mom, what's going on? You told me to come here today at 3 p.m. My voice cracked, trembling. She responded, her tone as casual as ever. "Oh, I'm sorry. I got the date wrong. Dean's wedding was last week. Are you okay?" "Okay?" I almost shouted but held back, aware of the guests staring at me like I was some lunatic. "You got the date wrong? You sent me the address, told me to come here, and now you're saying it was a mistake?" Mom was silent for a moment, then said, "Just go home, Leon. It's not a big deal." Then she hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like the world had collapsed. Not a big deal? I had driven 2 hours, worn my best suit, brought a gift I'd poured my heart into. And now, I was standing in a stranger's wedding, a laughingstock. It didn't end there. My phone buzzed again. A video was sent to the family group chat. I opened it and my heart seemed to stop. It was footage of me standing awkwardly in the lobby, secretly recorded from some angle. I saw myself in the video, face flushed, eyes bewildered, while the guests around me whispered and chuckled. Below the video, a message from Dean. "Haha, Leon showed up to the wrong wedding. Poor guy." Followed by a string of laughing emojis from other family members, uncles, aunts, cousins. Mom added a message. "Leon, ask properly next time, okay?" With a smiley face. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled outside, the cold air hitting my face. I sat down on the steps, my hands trembling. The memories of my childhood flooded back, the times I was overlooked, compared, and tried so hard to be loved but only received indifferent glances. And now, this? They secretly recorded me, mocked me as if I were a joke? Tears welled up, but I wiped them away quickly. I didn't want to cry, not for them. I looked up at the sky, trying to take deep breaths. The Mustang, the gift I had prepared for Dean, was still on its way to be delivered. I had thought it would be a way to reconnect, a way to prove I wasn't useless, but now, I just wanted to scream. I wanted to drive home, lock myself in, and forget everything. But then, a thought sparked. "No, Leon, don't let them win." I stood up, wiped my face, and walked back to my truck. I wouldn't let them see me fall, not this time. As I got into the truck, my phone buzzed again. A message from the delivery company. "The Mustang has arrived at the location. What would you like us to do next?" I stared at the message, my heart aching. But then a decision formed. I wouldn't let this gift go to Dean, not after everything that just happened. I texted back, "Deliver the car to my house. I've changed my mind." I started the engine and sped off, carrying a smoldering anger in my chest. My heart was shattered, but something was shifting within me. I was no longer silent Leon. Never again. The old pickup truck rattled along the highway, the engine's roar syncing with the quiet fury burning inside me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to keep my breathing steady, but the image of that secretly recorded video kept replaying in my mind. My awkward face, the mocking laughter in those text messages, and Mom's casual voice. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal? My entire world had crumbled in that extravagant banquet hall, and they laughed it off like I was some cheap joke. When I got back to Milford, it was already dark. The town was bathed in the dim glow of yellow streetlights, with factory smoke still lingering in the air. I parked in front of my small rented house, stepped inside, and flicked on the light. The familiar room greeted me. The worn-out sofa, the scratched coffee table, and a stack of investment books piled in the corner. This was where I had built my secret, something my family knew nothing about. Years ago, I had quietly started investing in the stock market with the meager savings from my job as a mechanic. It began with just $500 scraped together from overtime shifts and days of eating instant noodles to save money. I remembered the sleepless nights, my eyes glued to the laptop screen, heart pounding with every market fluctuation. I lost money a few times, stayed up worrying, but I didn't give up. I read books, watched videos, and learned from others online. And then, one day, an investment in a small tech company exploded. From $500, I had $10,000, then $50,000, and now over $200,000. A sum that in Milford people could only dream of. I sat down on the sofa and opened my laptop. The screen lit up, displaying my investment portfolio. The numbers danced before my eyes, a reminder. I wasn't the failure my family thought I was. I had achieved something they never could have imagined. My phone buzzed again. A message from the delivery company. The Mustang has arrived at your address. Would you like to inspect it now? I stood up and opened the door. Under the streetlight, the fiery red sports car stood there, gleaming like a dream. It was even more beautiful than I had imagined, with sleek lines and glossy black leather interiors. This was the gift I had intended for Dean, but now, looking at it, all I felt was bitterness. I walked closer, touching the hood, feeling the cold surface under my fingertips. I had done all of this out of love for my family, but they repaid me with humiliation. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of myself standing next to the car. The flash lit up, illuminating my face. Not the awkward one from the secretly recorded video, but a different Leon, tougher, more resolute. I opened the family group chat where the mocking messages still lingered. I uploaded the photo and typed a single line. The wedding gift for my brother. But I guess it's mine now. I hit send, my heart pounding, but not out of fear. Within minutes, my phone blew up. A message from Dean. Leon, what's this? A Mustang? For real? Then Mom. Leon, where did you get the money for that? Tell me. Dad called repeatedly, but I didn't pick up. Another message from Dean. Bro, call me back. This gift, I don't even know what to say. Can we talk? I read the messages, my heart cold. Now they wanted to talk. Now they wanted to connect. After mocking me? I replied with a single line. I'm living for myself now. Then I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the sofa. I stepped outside, looking up at the starry sky. Milford was quiet, with only the faint sound of the wind and distant machinery from the factories. My heart still ached, but there was a sense of relief. I no longer needed their validation. I didn't need to be Dean to be loved. I was Leon, and I had my own worth. The next day, I drove the Mustang to work, feeling, for the first time in my life, like the center of attention. My co-workers at the mechanic shop gaped as I stepped out of the fiery red car. Mike, the guy who always teased me, stood slack-jawed. Leon, did you win the lottery or something to get a ride like that? I just smiled, offering no explanation. I didn't need them to know everything. But their looks, no longer pitying but surprised, even admiring, gave me a new surge of strength. I returned home and opened my laptop to check my investment portfolio. The numbers were still climbing, and I began thinking about bigger plans. Maybe opening my own auto repair shop, or investing more, building a future I could control. As I contemplated the possibilities, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. Leon, why are you upset and not answering? I'm sorry about the other day. Tell me about the car. We're all worried about you. I read it but didn't reply. Worried about me? Or worried because they just realized I wasn't Leon the failure anymore? I set the phone down on the table, gazing out the window. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting silver patches across the floor. But in my heart, a storm had dissipated. The pain I felt standing amidst that unfamiliar wedding, the bitter choke of reading mocking texts, was gone. In its place was a strange lightness, as if I had shed a tight-fitting coat I'd worn far too long. I stood up and walked to the backyard, where the fiery red Mustang sat under the streetlight. It wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of the years I quietly persevered, the sleepless nights tracking stock charts, the moments I told myself to be stronger. I once thought this gift would make my family see me differently, but now I realized I didn't need their gaze to know my worth. I had lived 31 years in Dean's shadow, under my parents' unspoken comparisons pushed to the sidelines. But tonight, standing by the car, I understood that I no longer needed their validation. I was Leon, and I was enough. One afternoon, I visited a financial firm meeting with an advisor to discuss my plan to open my own auto repair shop. The idea had simmered for years, but I'd always hesitated, afraid I wasn't capable. Now things were different. With the money from my investments, I could rent a small space, buy equipment, and start. The financial advisor, a middle-aged woman named Linda, looked at me curiously. "Leon, are you sure you want to invest in a garage? With this money, you could do bigger things." I smiled and replied, "I love fixing cars. It makes me feel alive." Linda nodded, her eyes showing respect. For the first time, I felt seen as a man with a vision, not quiet Leon or Dean's brother. That evening, I sat at my laptop drafting a business plan. I wasn't a businessman like Dean, but I knew my strengths: fixing things, tending to details, and patience. I envisioned a small garage on the edge of Milford where I could work with passion, where customers would come not just for repairs, but because they trusted me. I thought about hiring a few young mechanics, teaching them what I knew, just as I had learned from those before me. But my family wouldn't let go. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Dean. "Bro, I'm sorry. That day was a misunderstanding. Meet me to talk." Then from Mom, "Leon, don't be mad. Dad and I want to visit you." Even Dad, who rarely texted, sent a single line. "Leon, you okay? Call me." I read them but didn't reply. It wasn't because I was angry, though I had every right to be, but because I didn't want to return to the old cycle. They only cared when they saw the car, when they knew I had money. If I were still the old Leon, would they have been so concerned? I knew the answer. A few weeks later, I signed a lease for the garage's storefront. The neighbors in Milford started to see me differently. Mrs. Maria, the tailor, beamed when she saw me. "Leon, I heard you're opening a garage? So proud of you." The owner of the local machine shop, a man who rarely complimented anyone, said, "Leon, when you open that garage, call me over for a beer to celebrate." I smiled and nodded. No one called me Dean's failure of a brother anymore. I began to realize that true validation didn't come from family, but from myself. Every time I fixed a machine, every time I saw my investment account grow, I felt complete. I didn't need my parents' pat on the shoulder, Dean's praise, or their belated apologies. I had found my worth, and that was something no one could take away. My new garage, though just a small space on the edge of Milford, became the center of my life. Every day I woke up early, brewed coffee, and drove the Mustang there, where the smell of motor oil and the clank of metal made me feel more alive than ever. I was Leon, a man writing his own story. The grand opening of the garage was a milestone I'd never forget. I stood in front of the modest storefront, now freshly painted, with a sign reading "Leon's Garage" neatly hung above. In the early morning sunlight, the sign gleamed as if it too were proud. I'd spent the week preparing, cleaning every corner, organizing tools, and even setting up a small table with cookies and coffee for guests. Neighbors, friends, and a few regulars from my old shop filled the yard. Mrs. Maria brought a basket of flowers, beaming, "Leon, you did it. This town needs someone like you." Mike, my teasing co-worker, raised a cup of coffee. "I knew it, Leon, you're the best." Laughter and congratulations filled the air, and for the first time I felt like the center of attention, not someone's shadow. I snapped a photo of the garage with the fiery red Mustang parked out front and posted it on social media with a simple caption: "Leon's Garage is officially open. Thank you all for supporting me." The post quickly racked up dozens of likes and comments from neighbors, friends, and even people I'd never met. "Congrats, Leon. This garage is going to be a huge success. Proud of you, Milford's best mechanic." Those words, though simple, warmed my heart. But then I saw notifications from the family group chat. Mom commented under my post, "Leon, I'm so proud." "You did great," Dean chimed in. "Big bro, the garage looks awesome. Wishing you success." Aunts, uncles, and cousins piled on with familiar platitudes. "Congrats, nephew, make it big." Leon, you're famous now? I read them but gave a faint smile. Their words came too late, too familiar, as if they only spoke because I was successful. If the garage had failed, would they be here writing these things? I didn't respond. I turned back to my guests, the people who truly valued me, and continued the opening day. The day I, Leon, stepped fully into the light. A year passed in a blink. The garage started attracting regular customers. Farmers, truck drivers, and even a few businessmen from nearby cities came to me, drawn by my reputation as Leon, the mechanic who fixes cars like he's fixing a watch. I hired 2 apprentices, young guys full of enthusiasm, and taught them what I knew. Watching them tinker under car hoods, I remembered myself in my early days when passion was the only thing keeping me going. The people of Milford no longer saw me as the guy standing in Dean's spotlight. Mrs. Maria the tailor even hung a small sign in her shop. "Take your car to Leon's garage. Quality beyond promises." I laughed when I saw it, my heart warmed. This was home where I belonged. With the money from my stock investments, I decided to do something I'd never dared dream of before. Buy a small seaside villa a few hours' drive from Milford. I found a real estate company online, and to my surprise, the agent who contacted me was Monica, my sister-in-law, Dean's wife. When she called, her voice was polite but carried the practiced tone of a professional, and I paused for a moment. "Leon, you're looking to buy a seaside house?" "I have one that's perfect for you," she said, as if the time I was sidelined at Dean's wedding never happened. I agreed to meet, not out of a desire to reconnect with family, but out of curiosity to see how she'd treat me, as a client or as the brother the family once overlooked. We met at the white wooden villa, perched on a gentle slope overlooking the deep blue ocean. Monica showed me around, pointing out details. The large windows catching the sunlight, the small balcony with white railings, the little garden out back. She talked nonstop, her voice enthusiastic like a true real estate agent. But I noticed her eyes falter slightly whenever they met mine. Maybe she knew about the secret video, the mocking texts in the family chat. Maybe she thought I was still the quiet, easily ignored Leon. But when I said, "I'll take it," my voice calm and certain, she was taken aback. "Leon, you're deciding so quickly? Don't you need to discuss it with anyone?" I gave a faint smile. "No, I can decide for myself." I saw her lower her gaze as if wanting to say something, but she only nodded and finalized the paperwork. The day I received the keys, I stood on the villa's balcony, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves, feeling the sea breeze brush my skin. It wasn't a lavish mansion, but a white wooden house with windows opening to an endless ocean. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I didn't buy this house to show off to Monica or the family, but to remind myself that I deserved good things. Every weekend I drove the Mustang there, bringing a book and a cup of coffee, savoring the peace I'd once longed for. This villa was mine, not Dean's, not the family's, but Leon's, the man who had learned to love himself. But my family, like an old shadow, wouldn't let go. One afternoon, while I was checking a car engine at the garage, a familiar car pulled up out front. It was Dean, with our parents. I straightened up, wiping my hands on an oil-stained rag, my heart beating faster but not from fear. Dean stepped out, still dapper in an expensive suit, but his eyes lacked their usual confidence. Mom followed, her face worried, while Dad stood silently, hands in his pockets. I knew why they were here. Since the photo of the Mustang, since my social media post about opening the garage, they'd been calling and texting about reconnecting. But I hadn't responded. "Leon," Dean said, his voice hesitant. You doing okay? We wanted to see you, talk a bit." Mom jumped in, her tone soft. "Leon, don't be upset anymore. What happened back then was our fault. We're sorry. You're doing so well now, we're so proud." I looked at Mom, then at Dad, who still avoided my gaze. I gave a faint smile, not out of bitterness, but because I was used to these words. "Proud?" I asked, my voice calm. You're proud now because I have a garage, a car, money, right? What about before? When I was just a mechanic, were you proud then? Mom stiffened, unable to answer. Dean stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Bro, I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you. We're family, right? Give me a chance to make it right. I looked into Dean's eyes, seeing a hint of sincerity but also unease. He wasn't used to me no longer being the quiet brother always in the background. I gently removed his hand and said, Dean, I'm not angry, but I don't need fixing. I've spent my life trying to please everyone, but now I'm living for myself. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. Leon, don't be so stubborn. Family is still family. I looked at Dad, the man who once told me to be more like your brother. I replied evenly, family respects each other, Dad. I tried, but I didn't get that. I'm okay now, and I want to keep it that way. I asked them to leave not out of cruelty, but because I needed to protect the peace I'd built. Dean looked at me, his expression complex, then nodded. Mom wiped her tears and Dad sighed. They got back in the car and drove off. I stood there watching the car disappear, my heart lighter than I expected. I had chosen myself and I didn't feel guilty. I returned to the engine, resuming my work. The afternoon sun streamed through the garage window, illuminating everything. 2 years later, my life had settled into a smooth rhythm, like an old machine carefully repaired and running perfectly. My garage became a staple in Milford, with cars lining up every morning. The seaside villa was now my sanctuary, where I found peace after long workdays. But one afternoon, as I was reviewing invoices at the garage, a familiar figure appeared. It was Monica, my sister-in-law, who had sold me the villa. She stood at the door, dressed more simply than I remembered, her face weary, her eyes red as if she'd been crying. Leon, she said, her voice trembling, I need to talk to you. I led her to my small office, brewed a cup of coffee and sat down. Monica, her voice breaking, explained that Dean had fallen apart. His company had gone bankrupt due to failed investments, and he'd spiraled into gambling and drinking, leaving behind a mountain of debt. Dean's not himself anymore, she said, tears streaming down her face. He won't listen to me, won't listen to anyone. I didn't know what to do, so I came to you. I sat there, gripping the coffee mug tightly, my heart aching. Dean, my brother, once the family's pride, was now broken. I remembered our childhood, building sandcastles together, dreaming of fast cars. Despite the old wounds, I couldn't help but feel pain seeing my brother in such a state. I looked at Monica, seeing the desperation in her eyes. Part of me wanted to turn away, to say I was done with the family that had cast me aside. But another part, the part I couldn't deny, still loved Dean, even if only as a remnant of our childhood bond. Don't worry, I said, my voice low. I'll help, but not directly. I don't want to see Dean, and I don't want the family to know. Monica nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude but also guilt. After she left, I stood outside the garage watching the fiery sunset over Milford's sky. My heart was heavy, but I had no regrets. I chose to help, not for the family, but because I wanted to be a better person than they had been to me. I quietly contacted a lawyer friend, asking him to arrange to pay off part of Dean's debt through an intermediary, as if it were aid from a charitable fund. I used savings from my investments, not enough to jeopardize my future, but enough to give Dean a chance to get back on his feet. I didn't want him to know, didn't want fake gratitude or belated attempts at reconciliation. I did it for the memory of the kid Dean who used to play with me, not for the Dean of today, who had forgotten I was his brother. Months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance in the city that Dean's business was picking up. He'd found a new partner, was paying off his debts, and was slowly regaining his stride. I wasn't surprised. Dean always had talent. He'd just lost his way. I didn't reach out or ask for updates, just quietly continued my life, with the garage growing busier and peaceful weekends by the sea. But one day, while I was working on a car at the garage, Monica appeared again. She stood at the door, dressed neatly but with eyes full of remorse. "Leon," she said softly, "I told Dean about how you helped us. I couldn't keep it a secret anymore. You deserve to know how grateful he is." I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead, and looked at her. "Monica, I didn't need his thanks. I did it because Dean's my brother, but things between me and the family are over." She nodded, her eyes welling up, then left. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. A week later, while I was at the seaside villa brewing coffee and preparing to read on the balcony, a familiar car pulled up to the gate. It was Dean, with our parents. They stepped out, their faces heavy with emotion. Dean no longer carried the swagger of a successful businessman, replaced by weariness and regret. Mom hugged me the moment I opened the door, tears streaming down her face. "Leon, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. We didn't value you." Dad, the quiet one, bowed his head. "Leon, I was wrong to always compare you to Dean. You're a good man, better than I ever gave you credit for." Dean stepped forward, his voice hoarse. "Bro, I didn't know you helped me. I was awful, mocking you, not treating you like a brother. Can you forgive me?" I stood there, hearing the apologies I'd once longed for. But strangely, I didn't feel the joy or relief I'd imagined. Their words came too late, after years of living in their shadow, after wounds that couldn't be erased. I looked at Dean, seeing the boy who once shared car dreams with me, but also the Dean from his wedding, who sent a video mocking me for the family to laugh at. I looked at Mom, who once said, "It's not a big deal," when I stood alone at that unfamiliar wedding. And Dad, who always wanted me to be like your brother. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm not angry, really. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were. I have my life now, and I need to keep it intact." They fell silent, their eyes filled with pain, but I didn't feel guilty. I invited them inside, brewed coffee, and we talked like old acquaintances. But when they left, I stood on the balcony watching the waves crash, my heart at peace. I had helped Dean not to make them regret, but because I wanted to be a good brother, on my terms. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work, but in quiet moments, often at night on the balcony of the seaside villa, I dreamed of a family. Not the old one with its unhealed wounds, but a new small family where I could give the love I'd never fully received. I imagined lively dinner tables filled with laughter, weekend mornings with kids playing by the shore. No matter how strong I'd become, I still longed for a place to belong, a place free of comparisons or favoritism. One summer afternoon, while fixing a truck at the garage, I met Sarah. She walked in, her brown hair tied high, her voice gentle yet confident. "Leon, my brakes are acting up. Can you fix them?" I looked up, catching her warm hazel eyes, and for the first time my heart skipped a beat. Sarah was a music teacher at Milford's elementary school, a vibrant woman whose smile lit up the garage. Each time she brought her car in, we started talking about cars, the weather, the songs she taught the kids. I shared stories about the garage, keeping my old wounds private. Sarah didn't pry, but her attentive listening and the way she laughed at my clumsy jokes made me feel seen, truly seen. Our love grew slowly, like a song composed note by note. Sarah invited me to outdoor concerts where she played the violin, and I sat in the audience, awestruck by her talent. I brought her to the seaside villa where we walked under the moonlight, sharing simple dreams. A year later, I knelt on the beach holding a modest ring I'd saved up for and asked, "Sarah, will you build a family with me?" She cried, nodded, and hugged me. For the first time, I felt I wasn't just living for myself, but for someone else, in the fullest way possible. We married in a small ceremony on the beach under a fiery sunset, with the sound of waves blending with Sarah's gentle violin. I sent invitations to my parents and Dean, not because I'd forgotten the old wounds, but because a small part of me wanted them to see me happy. Not to boast, but to close the past with a gesture of peace. They came, standing quietly in the back row among close friends and garage colleagues. Mom wore a simple blue dress, her eyes glistening, constantly dabbing at them with a tissue. Dad, in a rarely worn suit, stood tall, his gaze shifting over me with a mix of regret and pride. Dean, polished but lacking his usual confidence, stood beside Monica, his expression complex, torn between shame and gratitude. After the ceremony, as guests mingled at the small beachside reception, Mom approached, touching my arm lightly, her voice trembling. "Leon, seeing you this happy makes me so glad. I just wish we'd done better by you." I looked into her eyes, noticing deeper wrinkles and a rare sincerity. I gave a small smile, saying, "Thanks for coming, Mom. I'm okay, really." My words weren't cold, but they didn't open a door to the past. Dad stepped forward, hands in his pockets, clearing his throat. "Leon, you've done things I never expected. I hope you're always this happy." His voice was low, tinged with awkwardness, and I nodded, feeling a small pang. Not of hurt, but because I realized I no longer needed those words. Dean came last, as I stood hand in hand with Sarah. "Leon," he said softly, his hands clasped tightly. "Seeing you today, I know I was wrong for not valuing you. You're an amazing brother." He paused, looking down at the sand. "Dean," I replied evenly, "the past is the past. I'm not angry, and I hope you live well, like I'm doing." I placed a hand on his shoulder, smiling, not to comfort him, but to affirm I'd moved beyond the pain. Monica, from a distance, gave me a slight nod, a silent thank you. Sarah squeezed my hand throughout the conversation. When my family stepped away, she looked at me, her hazel eyes sparkling in the sunset. "You're so strong," she whispered, her voice full of pride. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It's choosing to live lighter. I love how you do that." Her simple, warm words felt like a sea breeze, making my heart lighter than ever. Sarah understood me, not just the man standing here today, but the boy who'd been overlooked in the past. I kissed her forehead, whispering, "Thank you for seeing me." My family left early, leaving me with Sarah and the people who truly valued me. I immersed myself in the wedding's joy, laughing with those who had become my new family. I didn't feel empty or relieved, just an odd peace, as if I'd given the past a final nod. Sarah held my hand, and we danced a slow dance under the moonlight, the waves providing the rhythm to our happiness. Sarah and I moved into the seaside villa, turning the white wooden house into a home filled with light. 2 years later, we welcomed our first child, a girl named Emma, with hazel eyes like her mother's, shining like the sea. Then came Lucas, a mischievous boy who loved tinkering with toys, reminding me of myself in Dad's old garage. Every evening I sat with the kids, telling stories of cars and the ocean, while Sarah played gentle piano melodies. Looking at my little family, I felt a happiness I'd never dared dream of. Reflecting on my life, the childhood memories remain, but they no longer have the power to hurt me. I vowed to myself I would never repeat the past. Emma and Lucas would grow up in equal love, free of comparisons or favoritism. I taught them to fix cars, Sarah taught them to sing, and together we built a family where everyone was cherished. Sometimes I got texts from Mom or Dean, casual check-ins, but I only smiled and replied briefly. They were the past, and I had found my future, one I crafted with my own hands, with Sarah, our kids, and myself. From that, my life's message became clearer than ever. Live for yourself, not for the validation of those who don't value you. I don't know what the future holds or if my family will change. Maybe one day I'll open my heart again, but not now. For now, I have my garage, my seaside villa, my fiery red Mustang, and most importantly, my family. I stepped outside, looked up at the deep blue sky, and smiled. This life, at last, was mine.